Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaste. We return to the battlefield. Duryodhana is dead, and there is all quiet on the battlefield. The war is over. But the war is over as far as the battlefield is concerned, as far as the Kurukshetra battlefield is concerned. What had happened is the war has moved from the Kurukshetra battlefield to inside the palace of Hastinapura. As Yudhishthira and his brothers, along with Krishna and Durdasa and Vidura, go to meet Gandhari and Dhritarashtra, Gandhari and Dhritarashtra were full of revenge. Gandhari and Dhritarashtra were full of the feelings of revenge. Yudhishthira had gone there for a possible reconciliation with Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, but he did not have any idea that it was hatred and revengefulness that was in the minds of both Dhritarashtra and Gandhari. Dhritarashtra wanted to kill Bhima and Gandhari wanted to kill Yudhishthira. But as we know, Gandhari succeeded in killing her only surviving son, namely Durdasa. And Dhritarashtra killed only an iron Bhima and Dhritarashtra killed only a replica of Bhima made of iron. So, but that was also not the end. Yudhishthira, following the tradition of those days, wanted to perform Ashwamedha Yajna to atone for the sins he had committed in the battlefield by killing his brothers and others. So he wanted to atone for them. So as Ram had performed Ashwamedha Yajna, Yudhishthira also performed Ashwamedha Yajna as an act of atonement. But Ashwamedha Yajna itself, but embedded into Ashwamedha Yajna is violence. The Ashwamedha Yajna had the potentiality for violence, because sometimes the kings through whose kingdoms the horse would move, would try to resist, would try to tie up the horse, and that invited fight. And in the fight, and the victorious would take the horse. But then, in the fight, many innocent soldiers died. Now, when the Kurukshetra war, in Kurukshetra war, there was so much talk about the death of innocent soldiers. Yudhishthira talked about the death of innocent soldiers. That is why he told Duryodhana that only 5 Pandavas and 100 Kauravas must fight, because it was their war and the soldiers were innocent. Shakuni talked about the innocent soldiers. So there was Arjuna talked about the innocent people who die in the war. And all of them thought the war was sinful, partly because so many innocent soldiers would die. But at the time of Ashwamedha Yajna, the talk of the killing of innocent soldiers was not there. So that was post-war. Look at the irony. In the wartime, there was a talk of death of the innocents. In the post-war time, the Ashwamedh Yajna would entail the death of innocent soldiers, but there was no talk about that. And that was not the end. See, Bhima, look at the conduct of Bhima. Now, Bhima continuously humiliated Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, in particular Dhritarashtra. He repeatedly, he could never forgive Dhritarashtra. And there was anger and hatred in his mind about Dhritarashtra. Now, he would describe to Dhritarashtra in gory detail how he had killed each of his sons. Dhritarashtra had heard the story from Sanjaya. He had suffered the agony of listening to the killing of each of his sons from Sanjaya, and he now heard how his sons were killed, each one of them, how each one of them was killed from Bhima. It was almost like a reenactment of that killing on the battlefield. So it was double suffering for him. And Bhima, whenever he found an opportunity, Bhima insulted Dhritarashtra. But Dhritarashtra stayed with them, Gandhari and Dhritarashtra stayed with them, because Yudhishthira would pray to them to stay with them and not leave for Vanaprastha. So it is because of the bhakti of Yudhishthira and his love that the couple stayed. But one day, when things went to a climax, and each day Bhima's insults were sort of growing in intensity, one day Vyasa came and Vyasa told them that, look, now you must retire to the forest and spend the last part of your life in Vanaprastha. Dhritarashtra would advise with perfectly good intentions Yudhishthira as to what to do as a king. Bhima thought it was insulting. Anyway, there was hatred in his mind. So if one has hatred in his mind and contempt in one's mind, then even the most innocent of things would look to him, would appear to him in a negative light. So he thought that when Dhritarashtra was advising Yudhishthira as to what he should be doing what he should do as a king, he thought that it was a criticism of Yudhishthira. It was a criticism of Yudhishthira's rule. So he said, why are you saying all this to Yudhishthira? You should have said all that to your son. That was insulting. He did not deserve that insult. When he was advising Yudhishthira what he should do as a king, he was doing it with affection, with goodwill, and he didn't deserve this kind of a censure. And then Kunti said that he would like to join Dhritarashtra and Gandhari and go for Vanaprastha. And along with Kunti, Vidura went and Sanjaya went. Sanjaya, Vidura and Kunti, Sanjaya and Vidura were well-wishers of the Pandavas, and Kunti, of course, was the mother. Now when Kunti left, Gandhari asked her, why was she leaving? Why was she leaving her children? Her children had now become the king, and she had suffered enough in her life, and the time had come for her in that old age to live a happy life and a kind of life in comfort in the palace. Instead of that, why was she leaving for the forest? Kunti said that after the war was over, she had only wept and wept and wept in the calm hours of the night. When night would come, she could not sleep, thinking that her eldest son had been killed by one of her sons, thinking that her grandchild Abhimanyu had been killed, thinking that her grandchild Ghotatkacha had been killed. And she simply could not come to terms with the death of Karna. The child who never got her affection all through his life now got her full affection, and now got her affection. And Kunti condemned Arjuna, saying that papistha, sinful, papistha Arjuna had killed her eldest son. So she also left. So there was once before they went to the forest, once that was actually the final that was in some sense the climax of humiliation. Now one day when Dhritarashtra wanted some money from Yudhishthira, so that he could perform the Shraddha ceremony or the rites, when she could perform the rites, the funeral rites of his children, the Kauravas. Bhima refused. Bhima said that he was not willing to part with any money for Dhritarashtra to be able to perform the Shraddha of his children. And let Dhritarashtra's children remain amoksha. Let Dhritarashtra's children remain amoksha, is what he said. Now this is something which nobody could ever say about one's worst enemy. That even after death, let the Atma remain amoksha. This is something which was absolutely unacceptable. So there are lots of things happened which showed that there was a lot of there was unhappiness in the family. Unhappiness in the family. No one, neither Arjuna nor Yudhishthira, liked Bhima's ways. They did not like his attitude, but they could do nothing about him. So there was unhappiness in the family. There was no reconciliation, no proper reconciliation. Despite all the efforts of Yudhishthira, there was no reconciliation possible. Gandhari and Dhritarashtra suffered, and Kunti suffered. And we know about, now what to talk about the kingdom. There are widows, children without fathers. So that was the kingdom. So it was a sad world. True that Yudhishthira reigned, he became the king, the son of Dharma, the man who steadfastly stuck to the path of virtue became the king. That is true. But then there was so much unhappiness, there was so much discontent, there was so much negative energy all around. So much negativity, not negative energy, but so much negativity all around. And there was a lot of suffering. Mahabharata, the world of Mahabharata, whether it is Vyasa Mahabharata or Sarala Mahabharata, the world of Mahabharata is actually a very dark world. Very, very dark world. A kind of depressing, one might even go to the extent of saying it's a very depressing world. So much negativity. But at the same time, no world can be so negative, no world can be so dark that there will be no glimmer of hope, there will be no glimmer of light at all. That is true of this world as well. Now, look at the positive thinking, a kind of thought that was a kind of thought which sustains us just because of its articulation. That such a thought could be thought of, that itself is sustaining enough. And that came from both Shakuni and Bhishma. So let us now talk about what Bhishma said. Bhishma told Arjuna, he said it much more succinctly and much more powerfully than what Shakuni had done to Yudhishthira, and that is this. He said that don't blame the Kauravas for forcing a war on you, when Arjuna said that the Kauravas had forced a war on the Pandavas. He said, look, in a family, sometimes there is a person who is wicked, who is notorious, who is evil-minded. But then what does the family do? A good family does not discard him. A good family doesn't discard him. A good family tries to accommodate him. And so one person in a family turns out to be bad. So others try to accommodate him. They don't discard him just because he was bad. So he said that Duryodhana was bad. He was wicked. He tried to harm the Pandavas. He turned out to be a vicious person. But at the same time, what did the Pandavas do? If they really thought of the Kurus as a family, then they would have said there is one bad person, let us try and accommodate him. And if it came to that, they would have said, okay, now rule over the kingdom and we are going to the forest. So that would have been accommodation. That is what one would expect expect from a good family. And that is not something which had happened, which was so out of the way. When King Pandu found that his elder brother Dhritarashtra was unhappy, because being the elder brother he could not become the king and his younger brother Pandu became the king. He cursed his fate, he cursed his blindness, and he suffered. The day Pandu knew that his elder brother was unhappy, he left the kingdom. He abdicated the kingdom in favor of Pandu. So it is not that in that family there are no examples of sacrifice of this sort. Pandu went to the forest and protected Hastinapura from the forest. That was a shining example of sacrifice, and that had happened in the family. And look at Balaram and Krishna. Krishna had cheated Balaram and embarrassed him a number of times, and he had made Balaram look like a fool. Balaram sometimes knew what Krishna had done, but this very indulgent elder brother forgave every misdeed of Krishna. And look at the love of a brother. If one brother is like this, the other brother does not discard him, or doesn't abandon him, doesn't punish him that way, but tries to accommodate. So these examples were there in the world of Mahabharata as well. And that is very positive. The very fact that these thoughts were pronounced, these thoughts were articulated, that itself is a glimmer of hope in the dark world of the Mahabharata. And not just that. When Duryodhana fell in the battlefield, wounded, and Bhima kicked Duryodhana's crown, and he kicked him on his head, Yudhishthira pushed Bhima and told Bhima that what he was doing was absolutely unacceptable. He lifted Duryodhana's head, put the head on his lap, and said that he had gone to all possible extents to make sure that this did not happen. He was inconsolable. And at one point he said that now I will leave the kingdom to Duryodhana and go to the forest and go to the forest. Bhima taunted him Bhima said, this man who is now lame, he will be the king of Hastinapur, this lame person? And Yudhishthira said, Dhritarashtra was blind, but my father Pandu left the kingdom to him. So why can't I leave the kingdom to my brother who is, who would be lame? And Krishna, so when Krishna put a stop to all this, and Krishna said, Mother Kunti is waiting, so now let us go. So that dialogue or that conversation ended there. But look at Yudhishthira. This is the love of a brother. Throughout Sarala Mahabharata, Yudhishthira had repeatedly called Bhima Dusta, and he always thought, he thought very often, if not at all times, most often he thought that it was Bhima's wickedness that was responsible for the antagonism and hostility between the Kauravas and the Pandavas. Bhima was the root cause. So in any case, this love of the enemy, this love of somebody who had tried to harm him, Yudhishthira knew that Duryodhana had harmed him many, many times. He understood, he knew, but at the same time, his love for the other, even when the other is the enemy, was so much that it did not seem to mind. So he was one. So Yudhishthira's forgiveness, Yudhishthira's love, Yudhishthira's ability to accept even the enemy and take all hostile actions against him as the results of his own karma. This is something which comes to us as a ray of light in the dark world of the Mahabharata. That's brotherly love. And now come to Kunti. After Draupadi's humiliation, Kunti was the one who wanted the extermination of the Kauravas, wanted the blood of the Kauravas. She succeeded, her desire was fulfilled, and Kauravas were all dead. Now it was Gandhari's turn to wish for the death of the Pandavas, and Gandhari wanted to destroy Yudhishthira, and Dhritarashtra wanted to destroy Bhima, and we know that they failed. We know that they failed. So this was the kind of situation in which we find Gandhari and Kunti at the end of the war. But after a period of stay in the palace, when Kunti also left with them, we have just talked about what explanation Kunti gave to Gandhari when Gandhari asked her why she was leaving and why she was not enjoying her last days, her old days in comfort in the palace. We know that. But when Yudhishthira asked Kunti, why are you leaving my mother? You are the one who encouraged us to fight the Kauravas. Now the fight is over, the war is won, and why are you leaving us? Whatever you wanted has happened. Kunti gave him a different answer. Now notice the difference in answer. I am not saying that when Kunti said that she had spent sleepless nights thinking of Karna and missing her grandchildren, I am not saying that she was dishonest. She surely underwent that pain. At the same time, what she now tells Yudhishthira is also important. And look at what she now says. And look at what she says now. She tells Yudhishthira that look, Gandhari and Dhritarashtra are old. They both, Gandhari has blindfolded herself, Dhritarashtra cannot see. So in the forest, as they would walk, they would stumble against something, a piece of wood or a rock, and would fall and bleed maybe. And each time this happened, they would curse you. So I will be there and I will serve them. I will save them from such things, and each time I do that, I will save you, my sons, from their curses. Now look at the love of the mother. The mother was willing to sacrifice herself, left the palace, and would go with and suffer the difficulties of living in the forest because of the love of her sons. She wanted to save her sons from the curses of the elderly people who were both blind. That is love. So if you are looking for love in Mahabharata, I have tried to look for genuine examples of love for Mahabharata. I have found this in Yudhishthira in the form of brotherly love. I have found in Kunti this love in the form of motherly love. There is something very positive about what there is something very positive about what Shakuni told Krishna. When we have referred to this conversation between Krishna and Shakuni earlier, when Shakuni said that he would do whatever Krishna wanted him to do, but Krishna must remember that he had come to the world, he had come to the mortal world, so that the burden of the earth, the burden of the earth is reduced. Bhubhara Nivarana. He had come to the mortal world to reduce the burden of the goddess earth. And peace between the Pandavas and Kauravas would not make that happen, so the war should be the only option left. So that we have talked about many times, quite a few times earlier in this series of 10 lectures. Now, Krishna told him that, look Shakuni, this is something which we have not talked about. So Krishna told Shakuni that, look Shakuni, don't die. I would like you to remain alive and survive the war. And Shakuni tells Krishna, no, that must not happen, because although I have succeeded in taking revenge against my enemies, I have avenged the death of my father and brothers and relatives, but at the same time I have committed grievous sin. Sort of the sin is at two levels. Innocent soldiers have died. The great Aryabharta has become virtually without heroes, without great warriors. Many great warriors have perished. And I have done the unthinkable. Namely, I have harmed my own nephews. So I have no right to live, and I should punish myself and get killed. And Krishna was happy. And he said the same thing to Sahadev, that also we have referred to earlier. He said the same thing to Sahadev when Sahadev met him in the battlefield. When they were fighting each other, Sahadev told him, why don't you go back to Gandhar and rule there? We have talked about it, and he said the same thing. And he added that if I die on the battlefield, it will be good because I would have atoned for my sins, and what better way could be there than dying in the battlefield in which Krishna is present. So I will see Krishna, I'll die in the battlefield where Krishna is present and go to Vaikuntha. So that is, so this is also, see, what is important for us is Shakuni's words. I would not like to call it confession, but something very similar to that. Shakuni's recognition that what he had done was terribly sinful. Maybe he avenged his father's death, maybe avenged his father and his family's death. That was fine. But at the same time, he had committed grievous sin. So this is also very positive. So there are lots of positives like this in the Mahabharata. And that is why I would conclude this part by saying that although the Mahabharata world is a very dark world, whether it be it Vyasa Mahabharata or Sarla Mahabharata, in particular Sarla Mahabharata, if it is, more so Sarla Mahabharata, if not in particular. If it is a dark world, it is not the case that it is so dark that there are no glimmers of hope, there are no glimmers of positive thinking, there are no glimmers of light. So there is love, and there is love, there is a recognition of one's own sins, there is desire to punish oneself as atonement, and there is articulation. There are articulations as to what there are articulations of what could have been done to avert the war. So war, which looked the only possibility, was not really without option, and the option itself was articulated by Bhishma, and the option itself has been lived in almost by Pandu. He had in his life he had demonstrated that option. So these are positive things in Sarla Mahabharata. Now I would like to talk a little about this is the last of the course of 10 lectures. Sarla Mahabharata is a great work, a great narrative, and there is so much to talk about, so many aspects of the work, but there is of course the 10 talks are too short a period to do justice to any of these things. What I have been able to do, if at all I have been able to do something, what I have been able to do is only scratch the text on the surface. There is so much depth that I have not been able to cover or even talk about. Now let me come to the last part of this talk and of the series of 10 lectures. And let me talk about the Sarla's characterization. Sarla's characterization. Each character of Sarla, in each character of Sarla, he showed some innovativeness. Now, what do I mean by that? Look at, when I say this, when I talk about innovativeness, I invite attention to the fact that Sarla's Mahabharata is a retelling. Is a retelling of Vyasa Mahabharata. So innovativeness has to be seen in the context of Vyasa Mahabharata. What was the character in Vyasa Mahabharata like, and what was the character in Sarla Mahabharata? What was the same character in Sarla Mahabharata like? So take let's say Draupadi in Vyasa Mahabharata and take Draupadi in Sarla Mahabharata. So the innovativeness of Draupadi in Sarla Mahabharata can be seen only with reference to the Vyasa Mahabharata. In fact, if we knew if translations of English translations or in Indian language translations of all the Mahabharatas written in these regional languages are available, then we would compare the characters of a particular character in all these Mahabharatas and look at the innovativeness. So that would be one way of that would be one way of seeing whether a character has been in what way a character has been So that would be one way of seeing how a character has been innovatively portrayed. Okay. The same thing would apply to a situation. Say for example, Vikas Kumar argues that this whole idea of prison and revenge is something which is not Sarla's original, but the prison revenge theme existed in so many stories floating at that time. There are many stories prevalent or floating at that time in which this there is an imprisonment of a family, and a very unjust imprisonment, and somebody in the family would survive and would solve a riddle and would come out, and with the help of somebody who is powerful, would in some way or the other, maybe in terms of intelligence, would take revenge and destroy those who had oppressed, those who had destroyed his own family. So that is the kind of story, that's a kind of format almost which existed. And according to Vikas, the originality in Sarala Mahabharata lies in the following, that in none of the stories there is this recognition of the person who took revenge that what he had done was also sinful. So that recognition is not there. So when Shakuni decided to die in the battlefield and not go to rule in his kingdom, that was an act of virtuous suicide. So this is original. So and this is innovative. So when we say that a character is innovative or a situation is innovative or a portrayal is innovative in some sense, or there is some part of the narrative which is innovative, we have in our mind a comparison. And in the course of these 10 talks, the text that is studied in comparison is Vyasa's Mahabharata, because after all, and this is very legitimate, because after all, Sarala's Mahabharata is a retelling of Vyasa's Mahabharata. So to conclude this part, I would say that we look at innovativeness in relation to the Vyasa Mahabharata. Okay, so his characters are very interesting and very innovative, and the two most interesting and most innovative characters are one, Shakuni. And about Shakuni we have already said quite a bit. You know, Sarala's Shakuni and Vyasa's Shakuni, we have said quite a bit about that. That in Vyasa's in Sarala's Shakuni, Shakuni has undergone double imprisonment in some sense. He was imprisoned, and when he came out of the imprisonment, he found himself imprisoned by the promise his father had extracted from him. You know, as they were all dying, as they were all dying for lack of food, after being imprisoned by Duryodhana in a stone palace, in a stone prison, his father and his father's brothers and his own relatives and brothers, they were all killed. They all died of starvation, and everybody left some food so that Shakuni lived, and Shakuni came out, fortunately for them. And Shakuni's father had told Shakuni that he must avenge the death of all these people in the hands of the treacherous Duryodhana. So this is not there in this is not there in Vyasa Mahabharata. In Vyasa Mahabharata, the revenge motive of Shakuni is, to my mind, a little weaker than what it is here. Here he was kind of destined to take revenge. It was not his choice. In Vyasa Mahabharata, Shakuni's decision to take revenge was his choice. But in Sarala Mahabharata, Shakuni's decision to take revenge was not his choice. There is nothing in the text to suggest that Shakuni liked all that Shakuni liked to live, wanted to live so that he could take revenge. That is not clear. But that is not there, you know. But once he lived, once everybody gave their food to him so that he lived, it was clear that when he was stepping out of the imprisonment, from the stone house, from the stone, from a physical imprisonment, he found himself imprisoned in another sense, that he was condemned to take revenge against the Kauravas, and he had to do it single-handedly. He had nothing, and apart from this, he had no resources apart from those little sort of dice cubes or dice sticks which were made out of the bones of his father. And as we know that even these were not used in the second game of dice, which led to the Pandavas' exile for 12 years and incognito living for the 13th year. So that was all that Shakuni had. So he had a powerful, he had the powerful might of the Kauravas, which he had to destroy single-handedly. So he resorted to treachery, he resorted to manipulations. What does a weak person do when that weak person is destined to fight the mightiest state, mightiest kingdom in Aryavarta. What would he do? He did that. He took the help of the Pandavas to get the Kauravas exterminated. So we have talked about Shakuni so many times, and maybe one thing that I might remind you here is that when Krishna went to the Kaurava court, because of the advice of Bhishma and other elders, at one point of time Duryodhana was inclined to give 2 villages to Krishna for the Pandavas, and Shakuni had intervened. Shakuni had said that nothing should be given to Krishna because Krishna is Narayana, because Krishna is an avatar of Narayana, and Narayana could not be trusted. He told them, now look what he had done to Bali, King Bali, in Satyayug. He just wanted a little, just little land, little measure of land, but when Bali, but he measured with his 2 feet, he measured the entire cosmos. There was nothing for Bali to, there was no land for Bali to give him. So Bali had to offer him his head. So that story he recounted to show that Narayana could never be pleased. Narayana could not be pleased by bhakti. Narayana could never be pleased by dana. Narayana could never be pleased by jnana. So atripta hai. So Narayana is atripta. He cannot be pleased by any of these. Therefore, the best thing is not to give anything to him. So this is this was the argument which nobody could contest. Bhishma did raise objections to this. To this, he said that is not the whole story, but there is something more to the story. But set that aside. The decision that was made was this: when Duryodhana said, "Okay, tell me which villages would you would like, or what would you like?" Then Krishna named 5 villages which simply could not be given, and Shakuni clapped. He said, "What did I tell you? Did I not tell you that he will ask for something which is so ungivable that once you give that to him, there will be no place for you to keep your feet on? Didn't I tell you this?" So that was Shakuni. Shakuni was intelligent, was wise, could argue his point logically, and he knew his limited resources, and he knew how to make the best use of his resources to fulfill his objective. And at the same time, he was aware that Krishna was Narayana himself and his will would prevail, and he surrendered himself to Krishna, saying that whatever you want me to do, I will do. So he emerges as a kind of bhakta of Krishna. So that is Shakuni. We have talked about Shakuni many times, so I don't have to elaborate on Shakuni anymore. I will conclude by saying that Shakuni is a character which looks like, to quote a critic, which looks like somebody who has been more sinned against than sinning. More sinned against than sinning. So Shakuni seems to be a person like that. So in Sala Mahabharata, there is my understanding is in Sala Mahabharata there is a kind of hidden sympathy for him. There is a kind of hidden understanding of Shakuni and all that he did. And what really redeemed Shakuni in Sala Mahabharata is his last act, which we have called the act of virtuous suicide. So the second innovatively portrayed character in Sala Mahabharata is the character of Krishna. So if you look at Vyasa Mahabharata's Krishna and if you look at Sala Mahabharata's Krishna, there is a lot of difference. All Odia critics who have studied Sala Mahabharata have said that Krishna emerges as a character who almost resembled Shakuni in negative respects. They say that Krishna was manipulative, Krishna was Krishna was unjust, he was manipulative, he could give wrong advice, and he was somebody who indulged himself in sex too much. So all kinds of negatives are said about Krishna. They said that the dignity and the grandeur and the greatness of the wisdom of Krishna in Vyasa Mahabharata is not there in Sala Mahabharata, although as in Vyasa Mahabharata, in Sala Mahabharata, there is his Aishwarya, there is the godhood. Okay, he has all the godhood. He has all the god-like avatar-like features in Sala Mahabharata as he has in Vyasa Mahabharata, but otherwise he lacks the wisdom, the dignity, the grace of Krishna in Vyasa Mahabharata. He turns out to be rather untrustworthy, wicked, wicked, unjust, partial, and too much indulgence in sex. Now, I would like to look at some of these and see what we can say about this. Now, when Krishna was when Krishna was dead, and Arjuna and Jara were trying to burn his body, the body would not burn. And suddenly Arjuna thought that the body was not burning because Krishna had committed so many sins in his life, including overindulgence with the gopis. So maybe because he was sinful, his body would not burn. That is one of the thoughts that occurred to him. But he immediately thought that, oh no, maybe I am wrong. Maybe this happened, the body is not burning because I am a mortal and my sinful touch of his body has defiled the body. Now why did, and then then the voice from the sky says that the body could not be burned, that fire did not have the power to consume this body, so leave the body in water. Why did this happen? Why did why did Krishna's body not being reduced to ashes, although there was a huge fire? What is the connection of this with the voice from the sky that the body that fire did not have the power to consume the body? Now that simply shows that at the Laukika level, at the at one level, the Laukika level, such thoughts about Krishna might arise, but at another level, these are negated by other things. At the cosmic level, these are negated, because at the cosmic level, the thing is that is the body of the avatar, and no fire has the power to consume it. So both these things are sort of there. So similarly, when Krishna goes to Yamaloka for Guru Dakshina, his Guru had wanted Dakshina from Krishna in the form of his Guru wanted the following Guru Dakshina from him. His son had died. He had died an untimely death. He was drowned, and then he wanted Krishna to bring the son alive. Now look at the Guru Dakshina that he asked for. Bring my dead son alive. So he goes to Yamaloka, and when Krishna goes to Yamaloka, so he he meets Yama, and Yama now knows that Krishna had gone there to ask him for a favor in some sense, because Krishna said that please return I have to give Guru Dakshina, please return my Guru's son to me, so that I can go to my Guru. So Yama, possibly for some time, he thought that it occurred to Yama that okay, that was the time when Krishna has come to him as a supplicant, as somebody who wanted his favor. So he thought he could tell a bit of his mind to Krishna. So he told Krishna that look, he said that what you are doing is something which is very difficult, which is unacceptable. That you have sexual relations with so many gopis, and you are so indulgent And if you do like this, if Mahat people do like this, what will people learn? So he criticized Krishna's relationships with the gopis. And what did Krishna tell him? Krishna virtually told him to mind his business and return the soul. So it was an order. So the discussion stopped there. So there was no conversation. When he said this, Krishna simply said, mind your business, do your work, return my Guru's son's soul to me. Now what does it mean? See, this is at one level. At another level, who knows the mystery of Krishna's relationships with the gopis? In Sarala Mahabharata, there is a hint, there is a clear hint that Krishna would be killed, that when Jara would kill him, Krishna, Jara would be avenging the death of his father, namely in Treta Yuga, in another aeon. And his father in that aeon was Bali, and Bali was killed by Rama, and Angada was always unhappy, thinking that he could not avenge his father's death. And when Rama sensed it, when Angada told him this, then Rama said, I will be reborn, and when I am reborn in a different avatar, namely Krishna, you will be reborn as Jara and you will kill me. So he had made that arrangement. So who knows what arrangements he had made with who in Rama avatar, so that they were all born as gopis and they wanted Krishna as their sort of husbands, as their lovers, and Krishna had that relationship with them. Who knows? And who was Yama to ask that question? Because Yama would not know. So you see, the narration, as I said yesterday, the narration operates at two levels. At level one, it is the Laukika level, what we see, what we understand. At another level, the cosmic level, we have some bare understanding of what cosmic level happenings are like, but we don't have full knowledge of that. So what promise Ram had given to who, so that they were born with the desire that they would get Krishna as their lover. So that Krishna himself knew. So that was at one level, and this is true that Krishna really sort of was treacherous in many ways. He played treachery almost treachery on Yudhishthira, and Yudhishthira had told him to go to the Kaurava court to work for peace, to avoid war. Now, but he made sure, he made it very certain that he would go and make sure that the war would take place. So that was a kind of treachery that he had played on Yudhishthira. Nobody knew. Okay, and he had advised Arjuna, or he had almost forced Arjuna to kill Karna when Karna was without weapons. So Arjuna was committed by his own oath not to attack anyone who was defenseless, not to attack anyone who was without weapons. But it is Krishna who forced him to kill Karna when Karna was without weapons. It was Krishna again who indicated to Bhima that he must hit Duryodhana at a place in the body which was not allowed by the wars of Gadayuddha, and that is what Bhima did. So he had done many such things. So and then when he went and asked, when he went to the Kaurava court and said that I want these 5 villages or these five villages, and those are ungivable, and that he himself knew that they were ungivable. He had done something which was absolutely absolutely unacceptable. Sahadev had told him earlier that, look, if you want war, then you must ask for these villages. If you want war, you must ask for these villages. They will not be given, therefore the war will take place. But remember, if you ask for these villages, it will simply mean that you are being dishonest. You are asking for what cannot be given, so you are doing an act of dishonesty. Now, you will be condemned for that. Somebody who has gone as a duta, somebody who is trusted by everybody. Now, if a Mahat person says things which are unacceptable, then that would bring condemnation to him. So I warn you. So he almost sort of warned him, saying that you can ask for the ungivable, but for you to utter such a thing would bring you only disgrace. When the Kauravas insulted him in the Kaurava court, Krishna wanted them to know who he was. So he showed his previous avatars to the Kauravas. The Kauravas could not make much sense of the avatars, but the rishis thought that the Kauravas must have done some great punya in the past, that they were fortunate to witness the avatars of Krishna. When Duryodhana tried to imprison him in the Kaurava court, then Krishna showed shows a great form, and the rishis thought that again this must have been, the Kauravas must have done something really punya, some have done some act of punya, so that they were witness to who Krishna really was. So here also the same thing. The narration is at two different levels. At one level, the Kauravas had humiliated him and they saw certain forms. At the other level, the forms are assigned a meaning by the rishis, in the sense that those forms are not just something which is very ordinary. Those forms showed who Krishna really was, and that he was Narayana. And that by showing the Kauravas those forms, he had actually kind of blessed the Kauravas, because witnessing those forms was not something which would have been ordinarily possible at that time. They all saw Krishna's forms, Narayana's forms. So I have been since the last talk I have been trying to insist on the fact that there are two levels: the level of the Laukika and the level of the cosmic, and sort of how things what kind of things happen at the cosmic level, and what meanings they have at that level, and what kind of things happen at the Laukika level, and what meanings they have at this level. Narayana is the creator of Maya, illusion. Narayana is the creator of Maya, which is illusion. And Krishna, his Purna avatar, was a victim of Maya. So Krishna was afraid of death. When Vishnu, his source, asked him to complete his, asked him to return to him, Krishna wept. He wept because he had a huge family. He had created a huge family and he was to leave them all. He was afraid of death. It looked, he had sent Bhima, he had told Bhima that Bhima must pray to Draupadi, who was actually a goddess, pray to Draupadi that that the Pandavas and Krishna must not become victims of death. And Draupadi had said that I will leave Yudhishthira, but no one else. I will destroy you all and Krishna and his Bansha. So he was afraid of death. He looked very uncomfortable with death, if not exactly afraid of death. He couldn't accept death. And yet, when he died, he died, with complete with complete acceptance and quietness. And when he died with great equanimity. So that was Krishna. And Krishna, everybody, Krishna is in Sarla Mahabharata, has been repeatedly mentioned as Purna Avatar, the complete manifestation of Lord of Bhagavan Narayana. He is Purna Avatar. By Purna Avatar, I don't have the time to go into what Purna Avatar really meant in Sarla's Mahabharata context, in the context of Sarla Mahabharata. All I would like to say is that as Purna Avatar, he had, he could ride, he could ride on the back of Garuda, and as Purna Avatar, he had Sudarsana. So everybody, so in Sarla Mahabharata he is referred to as Purna Avatar. And he is also referred to as somebody, who could give moksha. Krishna is the only character in Sarla Mahabharata who could give moksha, no one else. So he is the moksha giver, and he is the Purna Avatar. And at the same time, he could commit things. He could commit things which the vilest of persons could not commit. In terms of all that we have mentioned rather hastily and casually, rather hastily, all the things that we have mentioned. He played treachery, he could be sexually highly indulgent, all those things that we just mentioned. So he was all this. He could lie, he lied to his brother, he would lie to Balaram, he promised Balaram that he would never fight in Mahabharata war, but he used Sudarsana Chakra to destroy Bhishma's weapon which was going to kill Arjuna. So he did all that, everything that is negative you can think of, Krishna did. At the same time, everybody knew Krishna, there was nobody in Sarla Mahabharata who was not Krishna's bhakta. Duryodhana was Krishna's bhakta. But just as the bhakti of Yudhishthira, the bhakti of Duryodhana are not the same kind of bhakti. Okay. So there are as many bhaktas. Karna was a bhakta. So there was nobody in the universe of Sarla. There is nobody in Sarla universe who was not a bhakta of Krishna. Only that bhakti had several colors. So there are many kinds of bhakti, not just Navada bhakti. There are many kinds of bhakti, and everyone there was a devotee of bhakti. There was no exception to it. Now, and everybody knew he was Narayana. Okay. So he was the giver of moksha, he was the Purna Avatar of Narayana, everybody knew that he was Narayana, and at the same time he did things which are absolutely despicable things, which are absolutely despicable. The question that arises is, and this is what, and it is because of this that many who have studied Sarla Mahabharata and written about Sarla Mahabharata have said that Krishna lacks in Sarla Mahabharata. Krishna lacks the dignity and the wisdom and the poise and the grace of Krishna of Vyasa Mahabharata. But there is another way of looking at it. There is another way of looking at it, and that is this. See, it is repeated, when it is repeatedly said that he is the giver of moksha, he is the Purna Avatar, everybody is his bhakta in the universe of Sarla Mahabharata, everyone is his bhakta. Jarasandha at the time of dying, Jarasandha was a bhakta of him, and Jarasandha at the time of dying would say, Krishna, why didn't you kill me? I am a bhakta of yours. Why didn't you kill me with your own hands, with your chakra? I would have got. And everyone said, I would have got Vaikuntha. And everyone said in the battlefield that we have come here to die, seeing Krishna's face in the battlefield, so that we go to Vaikuntha. He is the mukti giver, he is the moksha giver. How does one sort of, make sense of all this? He did something which is not expected. He was unjust, he was unfair, he was partial. Now how does, and this is something which Duryodhana did not understand, that Krishna, who is Narayana himself, how could Narayana himself be unjust? How could Narayana himself do things which are patently unjust and unfair to him? So that was the problem. So Krishna remained incomprehensible. On the one hand, he was Purna Avatar. On the other hand, those who knew who was Purna Avatar themselves could not understand how he could be so impartial, how he could be so partial and so unjust in dealings with others. So he remains incomprehensible. And the interesting problem that arises is man can never understand God. Man can understand God, man cannot understand God in his fullest manifestation. Man can understand God only when he is partially manifest. So fullest manifestation of God man cannot understand, and that is the so God remains incomprehensible. That is one message which Sarala sends us. That don't try to understand Krishna. He is everything. On the one hand he is this, on the other hand he is the complete opposite. So he is everything. So don't try to understand him. Don't try to judge him in the yardsticks of human in the yardsticks created by human intelligence. So that is one message. The other message is he is trying to understand what Purna Avatar is. So according to Sarala, what is Purna Avatar? He is born as a human being, and when he is born as a human being, he has all the tendencies, the sattvic, the rajasic and the tamasic. So Krishna is, as Purna Avatar, is ultimate energy. The ultimate energy who is extreme when it comes to tamas, who is extreme when it comes to rajas, and who is extreme when it comes to sattva. He is the only character, he is the only one who not only was the knower of the past and the present and the future of the creation, he also knew his own past, his own present and his own future. He knew himself. He was Purna Jnani, Purna Atma Jnani. So he was the highest, or he was the most extreme in the manifestation of all the three tendencies, the sattvic, the rajasic and the tamasic. And these tendencies themselves are mutually contradictory. Sattvic tendencies and tamasic tendencies are mutually contradictory. And Krishna, by being both tamasic and sattvic and rajasic, by being this, he is the container of multitudes. He is the container of contradictions. And because he is the container of contradictions and multitudes, he is incomprehensible. But that exactly is what an avatar is all about. Now, with thoughts of Krishna, we end the series of 10 talks. With thoughts of Krishna, we end the series of 10 talks. And thereby, we are also paying a tribute to poet Sarala, who repeatedly said in his Mahabharata that he was not writing the story of the Kurus. He was only using the story of the Kurus to explicate on the Leela of Krishna. He repeatedly said that his Mahabharata is actually Vishnu Purana. So it would be most appropriate for us to remember Krishna when we end, and thereby remember and thereby remember Sarala and what he wanted to do, namely write a Vishnu Purana. Namaste.